Fad diets promise the perfect body, so why do they leave our minds in pieces? Eating disorder expert DEVORAH RODGERS joins me today to expose diet culture, how it warps the body image for women and men, fuels hidden eating disorders, and she tells us what it really takes to break free today on Off the Couch. And welcome to Off the Couch with Dr. Greg, where psychology meets everyday life. I'm Dr. Greg Cason, psychologist. I'm here with Bryan Gomez, producer.
Happy Monday, you guys.
We have Tony Sweet on the board.
Hello, hello.
Hi, Tony. So good to see you here. And today we have a special guest, someone I deeply respect, DEVORAH RODGERS, a licensed marriage and family therapist who really gets to the heart of eating disorders and body image struggles. I first connected with DEVORAH when we worked together at the famous Southern California Counseling Center, the very first community mental health center in the United States. And it is so famous, nobody's probably heard of it. But this is how famous it is, DEVORAH. It is what Charles Schulz based Psychiatric Help 5 Cents on yes, that is actually the truth. No. That is in the book.
All right.
That is an actual truth thing. I thought you might know that piece of trivia.
No,
yeah.
I did not know
And that's one of the cool things about Southern California Counseling Center. It is really the very first community mental health center in the United States. And it's a very special place, and that's where we met. What struck me right away about DEVORAH is how grounded and compassionate she is. And she doesn't just talk theory, she brings real insight from her years of working together with women and men who are navigating these silent battles. Welcome, DEVORAH.
Thank you so much.
The fans are already in motion. So, DEVORAH, I want to start with some facts just to get us rolling. How about that?
Great.
I want your opinion, yes or no. According to you, and this is, I wrote these down. You tell me how true these are or not. Nearly 29 million Americans will experience an eating disorder in their lifetime. That's about 1 in 10 people.
That's correct.
How about eating disorders have the highest mortality rate of any mental illness?
That's been true for a very long time, and people are always surprised to hear that. Yes.
How about which eating disorder is the deadliest, which is anorexia? Oh, yes, thank you. And for females 15 to 24, it's 12 times more fatal than all other causes of death.
People don't realize this, and it's really just it's like a silent killer. It's underreported. It's
Underreported. And how about men account for about 1 in 3 eating disorder cases, but are far less likely to be diagnosed?
Men are very unlikely to go for treatment.
Men are unlikely to go. How's the sound on DEVORAH right now?
Sounds great.
Oh God! I was just
Fantastic. Thanks for checking.
extra curious. I don't just concern about eating disorders. I also concern about sound quality. How about this one, DEVORAH? Teenagers are at highest risk, and many develop symptoms as young as age 12.
Yes, there are even cases where they develop it even younger. But yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Binge eating disorder is the most common eating disorder, more than anorexia and bulimia combined.
Yes, and binge eating disorder, the one thing I will say about that, it's less deadly. But it's if it's not treated, the intensity can grow. It progresses, as people get older.
How about social media algorithms can intensify body dissatisfaction?
Well, we know that.
We
know that.
How about that what I eat in a day category where people put all their food out, or people showing their meals, or that thinspirational, thinspo and all that stuff?
It's, that stuff has been going on for so long. When we had magazines, we would read the articles they would put out, and they would literally list their, what they were supposedly eating during the day. We also know that none of those things are true, so, and then people, a lot of times it's a double-edged sword, because then people feel badly because they can't eat what the person says they're eating. And that person's not even really eating that.
Well, that does call to mind. I mean, I do remember people would say, yeah, I ate those things that day. I just didn't say all the other things I ate.
That's true, too. Yeah.
How about most people with eating disorders never get treatment?
Well, that's the saddest part, is that, and with the deadly, implications of that, if you're not getting treatment, we know that most people with eating disorders, if they don't get treatment, it's going to progress. And that's just a fact. And yeah.
And so let's start with eating disorders, and we talked about young people developing them. Is that typically when it happens?
See, yes, but here's the thing. A lot of, especially young women, do develop eating disorders very young. 12 is not that unusual. But the issue, though, is that some people develop it much older. So, say, for instance, there might be someone who starts participating in a sport that has a weight requirement. So that really triggers the eating disorder and the sports that are notorious for that are kind of individual sports, so gymnastics, cheerleading,
wrestling too.
Wrestling is a huge one, and it's notorious for binge purge behaviors.
Because in wrestling, you especially have to very much control your weight because you have weight class.
Jockeys also.
Oh, of course.
Ballet dancers.
Oh my God, yes.
These are the ones that we really, we see a lot of, especially if you work in treatment, you'll see a lot of people coming from these backgrounds.
Wow. So let's talk about working in treatment, because you worked in treatment for a while. Talk about your experience.
When you work at a treatment center that specializes in eating disorders, one thing that you have to be aware of is even if you've worked in a clinic, let's say, with people who come in who maybe have an eating disorder, the acuity is much higher at a treatment center. And I frankly, it's...
When acuity means that the problems are much bigger, basically.
Much bigger,
yeah, this is the saying. It's like their life functioning is not so great.
Exactly. Activities of daily living are kind of out the door. And the problem is that, so people come in for treatment, and what we want to see is people come into these places for treatment. Also, when I refer people who I can't treat out for treatment with other therapists, I always want to refer to a therapist who has worked at one of these centers, because they're the ones who really have seen it all. And it's such a specialized field. To be working with people with eating disorders, it's very specific.
Oh, I can imagine so.
Yeah.
And I remember visiting friends of mine in eating disorder treatment. It was actually people I knew from college and high school.
Of course,
and even one childhood friend I visited in eating disorder treatment. And it was always interesting because I was kind of surprised by just basically what was.
And it depends where they're at. I mean, if you're seeing someone who's in a residential treatment center, it's a little bit different. And
that's what it was.
Yeah. Usually it's pretty. They've gotten to a place where we say we've referred them to a higher level of care. They're not able to go to a day treatment center, so they have to be supervised. And a lot of times, if they're anorexic, for instance, they're going through a refeeding process. There may even be people there who are being fed through, tubes, and it takes whatever it takes to get someone back to a healthy, viable weight.
So let's talk about the different types of eating disorders. Let's just kind of break them down, the basics. So what are the basic eating disorder categories?
Anorexia nervosa is basically restricting your food. So you're not eating enough to fuel your body, and your weight is going down to a weight that's not, for women in particular, if you're at an age where you're still menstruating, your cycle will stop. So that can adversely affect, like if later on you want to have children, that could be adversely affected. The other thing that happens is like when you're not taking in enough calories, your cognitive abilities, diminish. Yeah, that does come back when you get into recovery, but it can be pretty profound. It's like circular talking and thinking and
perseverating happens more, like frontal lobe dysfunction.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
That's why a lot of times if someone comes and wants to do therapy and they're really very, we say very much into their disease of anorexia, you have to send them to treatment first so they can restore to a level where we can actually do the therapy.
And just a note on anorexia, I remember working in the hospital once. I talked to you about this case. I worked in the hospital once, and there was a woman there who was anorexic, and the staff, the psychiatric staff, was trying to get her to eat, and what they tried to do is get her to drink basically a sip of those little Ensure cans. Just a sip. And that was incredibly difficult to do. Yeah. So, and I just remember this. I was just part of the team doing rounds, so I was just observing, so I didn't do any treatment or talk to this person. But one thing that was apparent as part of the rounds, and that was talked about, is that she was extremely engaging and almost distracting to the staff and would talk to them.
Yes. Well, here's the thing. A lot of times, this population, when we're talking about eating disorders, they tend to be highly intelligent.
And she was
very verbal. They also tend to be achievers. And especially the if we're talking about the women, we have like this good girl kind of thing going on where they will say that they are doing everything that we want them to do. They're not actually doing it, but they will really want to please you. And that's very difficult to work with because you have to get past all of that. Usually there's a lot of anger behind all of that. And so we have to deal with that.
I could imagine getting someone to actually express the anger would be extremely difficult.
Very hard. Most of the people that, are... especially with anorexia. Well, but we can talk about the other,
Yeah, we'll go into the others.
Yeah, but with anorexia, they tend to be people who are very accomplished and very, and they're striving towards something. They're very ambitious. And so they really want to perform. They want you to like them.
Yeah, and that's I would say that this particular person was quite successful in getting people to like her. But the other interesting thing that was noted was that in her room there were several stuffed animals and toys and different things that were age inappropriate in a sense, like for someone who might be 8 or 9 years old. And yet here was this person in her mid-20s.
Oh, yeah.
And so it was a little bit striking to see that in a hospital room. It's always nice to see family engagement and to see, art or flowers or some kind of something come back to the person. It's always a good sign. But the family, what they brought in were things that were more age inappropriate.
Well, there is kind of an infantilizing thing that happens a lot of times with these patients. And also you'll hear sometimes their voices or they will put on a very kind of high-pitched voice or a young voice. And a lot of times we'll want to, pay attention to that, what's going on right now. And one way to actually ask them is like, how old are you feeling right now?
What a great question.
Yeah.
How old are you feeling?
Yeah. And sometimes that really cuts through. They can really focus on that.
Huh.
Yeah.
What are the other types of eating disorders?
So the other one that we see a lot is bulimia nervosa. And that is... It's overeating and then purging, but it doesn't have to be necessarily purging by vomiting. Sometimes it can be purging by overexercising. So the person will take in just a tremendous amount of calories and then feel like they have to get rid of them. And if a lot of times people can't vomit, so they will go on these extended exercise.
So it'll be characterized by intake of food and then some kind of purge cycle, but it could either be vomiting or exercising.
Yes, yeah, or they will also. A lot of people too. They'll take diuretics, anything to get rid of whatever they've taken in,
and laxatives. That's the Karen Carpenter.
Sure, lots of laxatives. Yeah, which is really also is very dangerous. It really upsets the body.
I've always wondered, there must be some success that comes from taking laxatives or diuretics or exercise.
It's very short term.
It's short term.
So what happens is that, it stops working. Most people who have bulimia nervosa are actually an average weight. They're not usually underweight or overweight. They're usually pretty average. You can't really tell a lot of the time. And the things that we do see are swollen glands. And sometimes there will be calluses on their fingers from purging. And
in the teeth.
Teeth are a real problem. Dentists are actually, a lot of times first reporters. Yeah, dentists will definitely, especially if someone's a minor, will probably tell the parents, and that's sometimes how someone will end up in treatment.
I always heard when I was in school that eyes are the windows to disease, but also the dentist and teeth that are the first often to see things because, we don't usually get an eye exam unless you're going to the optometrist. Yeah. But, the dentists really see a lot of first signs of a lot of things.
And a lot of the patients that you see in treatment, if they're, if they've been purging for many years, they will have, after they go through the recovery process, will have a lot of dental work to do.
Wow.
Because they've done so much damage, because the purging gets rid of the enamel on the teeth and they deteriorate.
And what else is there? Because there are other types of eating disorders.
So there's, you mentioned binge eating disorder.
Yes.
And that's just basically eating, not eating because you're hungry, eating just to eat. And it's...
Which I do all the time.
Well,
seriously.
Yeah, it's there's a difference, though, between, like, overeating. That's a little bit different. Binge eating is usually tremendous amounts of calories. And it's almost like the person who does it, a lot of times you'll feel like they're kind of in a trance or like
they report that.
Yeah, it does a thing where it kind of sedates them in a way. And they just keep eating. It seems like they can't eat as much as they're eating, but they really can. And then, obviously the after effects of that are, obesity and, it's...
Weight gains, GI disorders, gastrointestinal disorders, and... other.
Yeah. I mean, it's though I will say, it's working with someone with a binge eating disorder is usually, it's the anorexia nervosa and bulimia nervosa are... sometimes more challenging. Binge eating disorder is pretty, we have to really address the eating, but it's a little bit different. Yeah.
And so those are the big three, but there are others.
Yeah, there are more. We don't hear about them as much. There's one that is actually relatively new. I don't think it's in the DSM yet, but it's orthorexia.
Tell us what orthorexia is.
So orthorexia is a preoccupation with either eating so-called healthy foods or being healthy.
Oh, geez.
And it usually ends up, you'll see these people, they'll talk about the evils of gluten or sugar or, whatever the current thing is, someone who's, any specialized diet is usually, it falls into this category. And so we try to be, it can be really damaging because it becomes very obsessive. And also, usually people like this are not really eating balanced, diets. And they're just not treating their bodies to what they need, all the nutrients they need.
Could this, there are some certain fads that are coming out now, like...
There's always a fad.
Yeah, but like the people who are meat eaters. Yes. I only eat meat.
Yes.
Is this orthorexia?
I mean, it could be. It depends on the person. I mean, I just think any preoccupation with diet and food, it starts to become, it's not really about health anymore. It's about controlling whatever is going in.
It's interesting too. When I go to restaurants now, it seems like every waiter starts with, "Do you have any food allergies?"
Right. Food allergies are really uncommon.
I know. And in fact,
Yeah.
I have a niece who has a very serious life-threatening,
Yes.
actually a life-threatening food allergy, has been hospitalized many times, and we've had some very close calls. So she has to restrict her diet in a very particular way.
Yes.
But she's interesting because I don't sense that she actually has an eating disorder. I mean, she might, but she's actually pretty peaceful about, I can only eat these foods.
Yes.
But she's even willing to go to a restaurant, bring her own food.
Yep.
That's
great. I mean, that's what we hope.
Or
for
we go to
people.
restaurants that she can eat, like she
That
can
she
eat
knows are
sushi
safe
and
for
things.
her.
Yeah, safe for her.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, food allergies are real things. They're just not as common as, as people portray them to be. There are definitely people with, food intolerance.
Right.
But that's different. And that's not life-threatening.
No, because I actually have one of those with sugar alcohols. I get extreme stomach cramps.
Yes.
So I try not to ever eat them. Like that's erythritol for someone who's looking, and that's in diabetic foods and candies. I mean, certain things. So I try to always stay away from those because they just always disrupt me. But I don't feel life-threatened around it. And I don't actually generally tell a restaurant that I have that.
Well, you know what to order, right? Yeah.
I try to.
Well, look, I mean, I think also the thing about the food is that you can tell when someone actually does have an eating disorder because the intensity of the way they talk about food is very different than just someone who, like what you were just talking about.
Yeah, I've gone out with friends with eating disorders, and and they're very. I just can't, I guess I have to be somewhat general here to say the focus on your food is big. The focus on the food in general is big. Yes. The ordering is intense. And then the non-eating of the food seems to have a whole ritual around it as well. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, I'm just scarfing something down, and I'm wondering, what's going on here.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a way of controlling the environment. It's a way of feeling safe. So food takes on a different role. It's not really about food anymore. That's right. How they control what's going on around them. It makes them feel okay.
And tell me about, I want to ask more about the eating disorders, but just as long as
more.
we're right here, tell me about this behavior. Trying to give other people things to eat. Well, I used to have a roommate years ago. This is just a long story short, this wasn't my roommate. It was a former roommate of the roommate I had. So this is a person pretty removed.
Right.
She had anorexia, but she was a master chef who could cook entire meals for this household. And she said there was nothing that pleased her more than to feed everybody else. And of course, a bunch of guys.
They're all going to eat.
They loved it.
Of course. Well, here's the thing. That's not as uncommon as you might think. And a lot of people, especially with anorexia, derive a lot of pleasure from feeding other people. Also because it's at least, they're watching you eat what they made. It makes them feel good. It also, they don't have to take in the calories. So they're not worried about gaining weight in that moment. But it's it's a vicarious pleasure, right?
It's sort of like food porn.
I mean, I don't know if I'd go that far, but there is definitely some satisfaction that they derive from watching other people eat what they've created.
They're food voyeurs.
They are, and bakers too. A lot of people like to bake for other people and really enjoy watching other people eat.
God, because I loved baked goods.
Oh.
So tell us what other types of eating disorders there are.
There are there are a few others. There's one called pica.
Oh, pica.
Right? And it's...
We always learn about this in mental health. It's a big one.
Yeah.
I mean, you learn it.
It's eating non-food.
Part of the fun.
Right? So it would be eating things like paper. You know, and it just kind of, sometimes people want to do that because it serves a purpose, like it fills them up and they're not eating, and it's obsessive. Yeah. And there's also, there are people who will do the chew and spit.
Oh, the chew and spit.
The chew and spit.
No, tell us about the chew and spit.
Chew and spit is, just what it sounds like. They will go to different restaurants and buy whatever food and chew it up, spit it back out. And I once had a patient who told me that she just drove around for hours doing that. You know, going to different restaurants and buying food and chewing and spitting it.
And where did she put this food?
In a cup.
In a cup that she kept with her?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And then she'd throw out the cup and start all over again.
Wow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So this allowed her to have the pleasure of tasting the food without
Exactly.
actually swallowing.
Yeah, not getting calories. It's actually, though, there is a health consequence of that as well, because what's happening is your body thinks that it's going to be getting food. So all these acids in your stomach are like gurgling up, and then there's
insulin.
nothing coming.
God.
And so it's pretty awful, you know? Yeah, it messes up your whole digestive system.
Wow.
Yeah, not as well known, but it's out there.
No, chew and spit I actually was not familiar with, so I'm always glad to
Learning
learn.
something new.
Always glad to learn. What were we missing any, or did we hit all the biggies? Because I'm sure there are shadow ones out there.
People do all sorts of stuff with food, but yeah, those are the main ones.
Brian, do you have questions about this?
Not yet. I'm just taking it all in. I'm like shocked with
like watching
everything
your
I'm
face.
learning. Yeah.
But the thing is, I can't help but think that everyone listening, including myself, is thinking, oh, do I have a problem?
I literally
Right.
thought the same thing when you said about working out after you eat a bunch. So I'm like, oh, is this me? And I'm like, when you said it's like a normal weight, I'm like, oh, is that me? The entire time.
Well, okay, so the way that, in therapy, I'm sure you'd agree, like the thing that we look for is what gets in the way of the way that you're living your life. Like, does it get in the way of your work? Does it get in the way of your school? Does it, these activities of daily living, is it messing those up? That's what we really look for. So, I would say if that's happening, yeah, it's something to look at. But if that's not happening, then,
You don't cross over into the eating disorder category. You may have an eating issue or an eating concern.
We call it disordered eating.
Disordered eating. We just flip the words around?
We flip the words around because we can't really, if we went into the DSM and we looked up, say, bulimia nervosa, we wouldn't necessarily see that you meet all the criteria for it. So we say, okay, no.
You're sub-threshold.
But there's, maybe it's something to look at.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. And I was at Disneyland yesterday. I mean, first of all, I do these things. Anyway, first of all, preparing for this topic today, I saw Brian, and I'm like, Brian, you've lost weight. And sure enough, he has. And then I went into something called a shame loop all by myself. And let's talk about shame loop. Because I was buttoning my pants this morning. First of all, I put on gray pants.
Yeah.
And I couldn't button them. And then today, and so I switched to the jeans.
Got it.
Jeans are malleable. You can stretch the hell out of them. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, I did. My dad pants are now skin tight.
Okay.
So, I know my day at Disneyland probably didn't help, but in general, I saw lots of thin people eating ice cream yesterday.
Yep.
So I have to say I became super hyper aware doing this topic today. Like, oh no, do I have a problem?
I like that you talked about ice cream because I think that ice cream is a really important, this is one of those things.
Focused right in on them.
Yes, of course. But here's the thing, no meal is going to be the thing that ruins our figure, right? There's not one meal in the world that is going to do that. And this is really about, balance. And I hope that everyone has ice cream.
Well, I continue
regularly.
to.
That's my hope.
Yeah, I mean,
You know, it's
hasn't
because
stopped me.
yeah, because but the thing is that we want people to have, you know, we want them to enjoy their meals, enjoy their food, right? It's really important, but it's like, is it becoming your entertainment, or is it you know? And then we have to take a look at it, like what role is it playing in your life?
Are you asking me?
No.
Oh, okay.
Just putting it out there.
Because I can answer. I mean, ice cream, I just genuinely enjoy it.
Yeah.
And a hot day, it's so good.
Agreed.
And I don't know. I like it with hot berry cobbler or something.
Yeah, I'm getting hungry. Yeah.
So, I mean, I have to say, but I do understand, and I do have foods that I will just munch on. Just black licorice. I could eat a whole bag of that just and just love it. And I know people hate it.
Yeah, I hate it.
Yeah, I know.
What about you?
Yeah, I don't like licorice either. No.
But do you have foods that you just, if they're right in front of you, just snack on? Oysters? What?
No, just chocolate or cookies. Well, actually, or ice cream. I'll eat it all.
Sweets.
Sweets,
Yeah. Well, that's interesting also because, you know, it depends. Like, a lot of times people gravitate more towards sweets, and then some people like starchy things, potatoes, breads, and all of that. It kind of, you know, they give you different feelings.
Well, I was at Monsters Inc. This is a ride, and they had a vending machine that offered salty, crunchy, fatty, and chewy snacks.
Right.
All those 4 different categories you had to select. I'm like, those are all 4 of my favorite food groups.
Exactly. Yes, I understand that.
So anyway, being at Disneyland was kind of an interesting thing because again, maybe just knowing you're coming today, because I was thinking about eating. And when you're at Disneyland, you do what you do. But I looked around too at the body types there. And like I said, I saw lots of skinny people eating ice cream and thought, why can't I? Although I could. I mean, you know, I thought, no, I better hold back. I know, seriously. This is how it starts.
Well, here's the problem is that I think, like, you kind of mentioned a little bit about social media and the influence that has. I think that the main thing that we all have to think about is, like, when you look around the room, everyone's body is different. You're not going to see 2 people with the exact same body.
That's true.
And so we all have to, like, take care of our own bodies in a way that makes sense to us. And some people, you know, are taller and bigger, and some people are smaller, and that's just life, you know. And the thing is that if we're trying to change our body to fit some sort of ideal that we think we should have, that's, you know, that is very problematic.
That's a great point, because like our board op, Tony, was a high school football jock champion and then became a personal trainer. I mean, so, you know, and then here you are, still looking great. And, well, and then, you know, I mean, so obviously physical fitness has been important to you, but how much was just the gift of genes? Not in the tight ones I have on, but...
No, I think because we talked before the show that my mother was anorexic when I was probably 12 to about 16.
Right.
So for years she went through, you know, therapy and actually in mental institutions. She was at the VA mental wards and stuff like that. But she also, how she took it, my dad found like a huge box full of X-Lax.
Yeah.
Huge box. I mean, it was boxes and boxes and
Yeah.
boxes that were empty boxes that she used to take. So, but once she kind of got over that, she put on a lot of weight.
Yeah.
And then when I would, in my 20s, I'd be like, oh, I need to lose like 5-10 pounds. And she'll be like, oh, I mean, she would just get freaked out. Like, don't lose too much weight. Don't lose too, because
Well, she was obviously still struggling too,
For
right?
sure,
Yeah.
for sure. And I think I went through a little bit of eating disorder going through my 20s because I got into really good shape, but I never felt like I was thin enough to
Enough.
enough. And so I got down like 170, and people were like, "Are you okay?"
Yeah, that
170 on me.
That would be very, very lean.
Yeah, 170 on me was like
skeletal.
I looked sick, and so I finally, and now in my 50s, where I feel like I'm not the shape that I used to be, which 50s you're not, but I feel more comfortable in my skin now than I ever have.
Hope. That's the hope, is that all of us feel good in our bodies.
Yeah. Even though I have a little bit of layer, I'm like, I don't care. I feel good.
It's really what we're talking about is health over, so it's like function over like the, what we're seeing. We really want, a lot of times when we're working with people in treatment, we want to make sure that we're always, getting them to the doctor to get blood tests done and everything, because really that's our optimum goal. It's not a certain weight ever. What we really want is we want them to their bodies to function properly.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, and when you have like for instance, anorexia, your levels are crazy. Everything is off. Weirdly enough, a lot of people with anorexia have very high cholesterol. It's just everything goes haywire.
But how does it develop? Because I had to wonder, gosh, am I being overly obsessive? Or is this just a temporary thing and I'll be on to the next thing by tomorrow? Or
You mean right now? Or
when I was going through that. Or like Tony, I was actually surprised to hear that you developed, but it's not unusual, because especially when physical fitness is your world,
that's right.
The body dysmorphia becomes a reality. Like we always think it's got to be better, perfect.
Well, what happened was, up until I was 16 years old, I was 250 pounds. I was fat. I was fat. And so by the end of my freshman year, I had lost 60 pounds.
Tell them your height, just so to
about
get
6 feet.
Okay, yeah.
So, and so everybody was like, "Oh my God,
you got a lot of
so
positive."
Good. Oh yeah. But my mood changed, not for the good. They were like, I became more isolated. I became more shy. When I was kind of had weight on me, people were like, "Oh, you were outgoing and funny and this and that." And so it was weird how it changed my personality.
Were you uncomfortable with the attention?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
No, yeah.
I mean, it felt good, but it was uncomfortable too. Yeah.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense to me. And especially when you're not used to getting that kind of attention, it's, it can be very destabilizing, right?
Yeah. Even the high school football coach said, "You're like the best before after picture." Yeah. And so when your coaches would make comments, yeah.
Well, that's an interesting point, because I think that what people don't understand is when you think you're making a positive comment about someone's body, you don't know where they're coming from. No. So it doesn't necessarily get taken as a positive. Right. And also a lot of times then that person feels pressure, to maintain.
Yeah.
So how do we approach it?
Well, and when you work like in a treatment center, you actually make a point of not talking about people's bodies ever at all.
Okay.
Because it's, for instance, if someone is anorexic and you tell them something like, "Oh, wow, you look so healthy," their brain goes, "They think I'm fat."
You're sabotaging me?
Instant, and they are going to stop eating. It's very triggering. So you really have to stay out of the talking about people's body.
Did you ever see that TV series called Perfect? No, I'm sorry. It's called Perfect. No, yeah, Perfect? Yeah, it is. No, maybe I'm getting it wrong. It's with Rose. I'm sorry. She plays an aerobics instructor. It's on Apple TV.
Yes, I did see it.
Did you see it?
I did see it.
What do you know? What was that called?
I don't remember what it was called, but she was bulimic.
She was bulimic.
Yeah.
And they really portrayed hardcore her eating disorder. So she was this beautiful woman who kind of started this whole aerobics,
Right.
Fictionally started this whole aerobics trend, back in the 80s or late 70s. And it was just sort of a thing, like as if she were the one to do it. But they portrayed that she had this big backstory, that she had bulimia, and they showed her eating.
That's right.
They showed her purging, but mostly the eating and the ritual she went through with this eating.
Yeah.
That she would get like 4 or 5 hamburgers and she'd lay them out all on. She would rent a hotel room,
Yep.
lay them out on the bed, and then begin the first one and eat that till it was done, and then begin the second one and eat that till it was done. And they portrayed this over and over. And she always did it after an emotional event in her life or something going wrong.
By the way, I don't remember the show that well, but
Oh.
I do. But I will tell you this: that usually the weird thing about that is that people will do that after a negative event and also a positive.
And I think they portrayed that.
Oh, they
Yeah.
did. Yeah. And that's amazing, that they did that, because the thing that people don't understand is they think that that's just after something negative, like they'll go and binge and purge because that,
Gets control again.
yeah, or also comforts them. But the truth is that no, even after a very positive, some real great success happens, that could trigger,
It allows them to do. This is the same thing in substance abuse. It's
Yes,
the same cycle.
Absolutely. It's very similar.
So tell us about how someone develops an eating disorder.
There are so many ways.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there are so many ways. But, sometimes it's within the family, especially, if a parent is exhibiting signs of an eating disorder, a child is much more likely to develop one. So, for instance, if, your mama had anorexia, I mean, that...
Referring to Tony.
Yeah. Tony, that doesn't surprise me that then, that you have those feelings too, because look, that's what you grow up with. That's what you know. That's what you're seeing. A lot of girls that I've worked with have said that their moms, were, or sometimes dads too, to be honest, exhibited a lot of restrictive behaviors, which they just took further. They were going to be the best at it.
That's so interesting. And I also have talked to people, people I know casually, not patients, but people I know casually, who've talked about their fathers, women, talked about their fathers pressuring them to have a specific body.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I was surprised by, because the stereotype is the mother putting the pressure on.
Yes and no, because here's the thing: a lot of times the father really, they think they are doing the best by their daughter by telling them what they need to be. But it's it's impossible for most girls to adhere to these very, very stringent guidelines of what their bodies are supposed to look like.
And so, what are the ways that someone develops it? Is it then it's parent?
Could be parents
modeling. It could be parent pressure.
Yes, it could be school. Also,
School.
Sometimes if a child's at school and they're getting a lot of negative attention, they'll maybe develop it as a way of controlling what's going on with their body. Sometimes also when you're becoming sexual, it's a way of protecting yourself. So the binge eating comes in.
There's a comedian, Jessica Cason, who talks about that repeatedly, that she gained the weight to keep people away from her sexually.
Very, very common, unfortunately. And, also if someone has any kind of sexual abuse in their childhood, they're much more likely to develop an eating disorder. I think it's something like, of the people that come for treatment, this is not all the people who have eating disorders, but of the people who come for treatment for eating disorders, it's something like 80 to 85% of them have had some sort of sexual abuse. Something has happened to them.
Wow. So,
and I think it's even higher in my
may
experience.
Even be higher.
It's pretty much almost everybody that I worked with in treatment had something.
Wow. And are there other things? Are people ever biologically predisposed to eating disorder?
Yes. I think so. And, it's kind of like substance abuse. If we go and we do a genogram, which is kind of like a family tree, right?
Yeah, she's smiling because it's kind of a a therapy inside word.
Yeah,
It's
and we'll actually color code it to like all the things that are in the family. For instance, eating disorders, substance abuse, all of these things, and we'll see patterns. So we definitely know there's some sort of genetic predisposition towards it. It just kind of it's not just having that, but also maybe something else that happens in your life that just brings it on.
And how much has to do with cultural factors? Because Bryan and I were talking about that, actually, at least we see a difference in very poor countries versus industrialized or wealthier countries.
Well, that's unknown, actually.
It is unknown?
Yeah, we don't really know because there are, it's underreported in so many areas. And
Okay.
I mean, there was actually a woman I know who wrote a book, and it was called something like, I can't remember, but
We're having a lot of memory lapses today.
but she
At
wrote
least
a
I
book,
am.
and it was basically about the African American population
Ah.
and the incidence of eating disorders, in the African American population, which is much higher than we imagine, but is underreported as well.
That's so interesting. And tell us too about, like, I was at Disneyland again. I just keep saying that. I'm not trying to give them anything, but the other thing I really noticed while I was there is not the customers, but the employees. I used to work at Disneyland, and so I remember what it was like working there. I remember they call your uniforms costumes there because you're a cast member and you're on stage, et cetera, et cetera. So I worked in 3 different departments there, and we used to, all the departments used to be themed, like, you fit into a mold to be in a certain department.
Sure.
Like Fantasyland was just chock filled with blonde people for whatever, Bavarian, etc. And Tomorrowland was people of all colors, sizes, because it's the future. Adventureland was dudes. I mean,
really
it didn't
funny.
mean that you didn't see women. It was
Right.
just, and on we could go about this type of thing. So I was there, and Disney's a little more mixed about its staff now. I think they don't theme it out quite
That's
so
good.
specifically. But one thing I did notice, and I don't think this is Disney's issue, because I don't remember employee body types being the same when I was there, that people were much heavier than they once were. And so a question came to my mind is, how much of this has to do with our food supply, cultural issues? Are things different? Because I remember, when I worked there 40 years ago, it looked different.
Well, I can't really speak to, because that, I don't know the statistics.
No, I don't know any.
Yeah, but I will say that the one thing I have noticed, and I think you'll notice it too when you go into stores and see, there's a lot more inclusivity of different body types. And I think that that's a real positive thing, because,
absolutely.
Because we get to see, like, I remember being a little girl and, like, if short Jewish girl, right? Not particularly athletic. So, but smart. But I remember going into stores and I would see, all the models really, there were never any that looked like me. It was kind of, and it was not something I could aspire to. I was never going to be a tall, blonde, athletic girl. Never gonna happen. So I think it's a positive thing. And I think, in terms of body sizes, I don't really know. I don't have that information.
Well, I didn't know. I mean,
Yeah.
and I know you didn't work there, so it's not
Right.
like a thing you would know. It was just it struck me, and it's a question that I have open, because it was a then and now comparison. And I know Disney operated differently back then. Like I said, they cast people very specifically.
Yes.
So they might have been very restrictive about body types.
Well, that's
back
what I
then.
wonder. Yeah.
But at the same time, people do, and by my naked eye, look different than when we were kids. So, or at least when I was a kid. So I'm just wondering,
Yeah. The
is
only
there
thing
something about our food supply or something that might be a piece of this?
I don't know the answer to that, but I will tell you that I do know that the advertising has changed, that we are definitely seeing, different types of people around us, which is great, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is great too. And tell me also about this new political movement called MAHA, which is called Make America Healthy Again. How is that? Is that helping or hurting?
Well, it feels very orthorexic to me. I mean, it sounds a little like I don't really know what the guidelines are for that. MAHA, like, what are the guidelines?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
Because I think it's just whatever pops into someone's head that day.
Yeah,
it seems like. Am I being? But it's just. I mean, I've not been able to figure it out either.
The reason why I ask that is because working with people with eating disorders, health, we always really go back to function. Like, how is the body working? Is it working well? If it's working, then you're healthy. Like, if it's not working, you're not healthy.
And this whole issue of crunchy moms, have you heard of that?
No, what's that?
You haven't?
What is that?
Do I know only the people that have like these particular things going on? This is a whole movement that's happening.
What's a crunchy mom?
A crunchy mom, I have no idea. Is there anyone who knows the definition? It's just basically these moms who are health establishment. They don't like the pharmaceutical industry. They don't like the health industry. They want to get back to nature. They're kind of anti-vaccine, a lot of them. It's a whole movement.
I see.
It says a crunchy mom is labeled for mothers who embrace a natural, holistic lifestyle and parenting approach. That's it.
And it's a whole movement that's going on out there.
I mean, look, I think, wanting your kids to be healthy is great, but I also worry about the no vaccines. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that is. It's just that's been my impression. I mean, maybe because some of the leaders speak about that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's problematic in my worldview.
Yeah, no. And so we developed the eating disorders. How much do things like guilt, anxiety, low self-esteem play a role in the eating issues?
They're a huge part of it. The truth is that there's an idea that somehow, our self-esteem is going to change when we change. Like, maybe someone will say, if I lose 10 pounds, I'm going to feel so much better about myself. May or may not be the case. Usually what we find is that that's not really what this is about. The 10 pounds might go away, and then you still are yourself. You're exactly the same person that you were.
I found that to be true.
Ago. Yes.
I can't get rid of me.
Yeah. Wherever you go, there you are, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the wildest thing.
Yeah.
But tell us too, and speaking of too, about me, about eating, about gender, because it's interesting. We often associate eating disorders with women, but as I said, a good number can be men.
Yes.
And we actually see a very high incidence in the gay community.
Yes.
So tell us about how gender functions in this.
So what we know is that, we don't really know the numbers for men because, to be honest, they seek treatment so infrequently that we can't really even know how many men are suffering with eating disorders. But we do know that it is identified as a woman's disease. And that really also stops more men from actually seeking help because they think of it as, oh, I can't have that because I'm a guy.
Wow.
And that is not true. We know that for a fact. I've worked with many men who have had eating disorders. And I do think that, a lot of times the sports that we mentioned earlier do play a big part in that. And also nowadays, too, what we're talking about is like physiques, like people wanting to have a certain physique. In the gay community,
yes,
it's, having your body look a certain way has a certain power.
It's a commodity. Yeah,
right.
Power is a good word for it. And I often think, does this have to do with having men as your important love objects? Because men, let's face it, we dudes are kind of critical about physical.
Objectify, I think is the word.
We objectify a lot.
Yes. And
that creates a pressure on whether you're woman or a heterosexual woman or gay man.
Yep.
But I think we also see eating disorders in other communities in those too. But nonetheless, there is that additional pressure.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that for women, it's very important that we're given very, very tight guidelines. There really isn't a lot of wiggle room there. So, the idea that to be a certain size is ingrained in us at such a young age that it's very, it feels like a lot of pressure. I can speak as a woman. Yeah.
So, just because we're running short on time,
Mm-hmm.
what are the moves to treatment? Is it just eat less, move more?
No.
Oh.
Wouldn't it be nice if that was the whole?
I love that terse little solution to everything. I hear that so much. Just eat less and move more.
Mm-hmm. God bless. But it's the truth is that if it were that easy, like we'd all do it, right?
Yeah.
And then I wouldn't be talking about this stuff. It's really more about like what is the eating or the not eating or the binging and purging, whatever you're doing with food. What does it mean to you? What are you getting from these behaviors? And sometimes, going to a treatment program can be a good solution, or finding a therapist that is specialized in eating disorders or disordered eating and understands how to treat it. In addition, I usually recommend that someone get some sort of nutritional help, but making sure that you go to a registered dietitian.
Yeah,
someone
preaching to the choir.
Yeah, someone who's
good.
Very educated, and also someone who specializes, because not all dietitians specialize in eating disorders.
No,
as well.
and a lot of people call themselves nutritionists are not registered dietitians. This is a specialized training that people get, and then they become certified,
correct,
licensed,
really,
registered. Yeah. I don't know that they do get a state-specific certification that says that they are qualified to do this type of work.
Yes, there is. There are qualifications for that certificate, and it's really important that you don't just go to a nutritionist who just hangs a sign up and says they're a nutritionist
or has an Instagram profile.
These are not necessarily, dietitians, and we just want to find out, like, what is your training, and also, are you, certified by the state?
Excellent. Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then go to treatment, and then treatment. Just, a couple weeks and you're out?
Wouldn't that be nice, too? Yeah. Look, here's an issue with treatment is that usually if you do have decent insurance, it may be at least partially covered, but it is very expensive. So there are a lot of alternatives, too. There are also 12-step programs that you can join.
Oh, like OA or Overeaters Anonymous?
Overeaters Anonymous is everywhere, and you can go to online meetings, and they offer a lot of support. And they're not all created equal, so you have to find, meetings that work for you. But that's an option, and it's, no cost to you. I would say getting a therapist would probably be really important, especially if you are, restricting or binging and purging.
Just to know you're not alone.
Absolutely.
I mean, my God, because...
Build community. It's really important. If you can, if going, to a support group or some place where you can talk to people who understand what you're going through is vital. Yeah.
And what would you guys suggest, like, if one of your friends has an eating disorder, and, like, how do you approach that, or what can you do to help?
That's a good question. Look, it's really difficult, especially if someone's in a very... like if someone is restricting very, to a place where they're at an unhealthy weight, then, maybe finding out if they have family who support them and getting in touch with them. It's very difficult to approach someone who's in the throes of an eating disorder because they're probably going to tell you they're fine. So the best thing that you can do is just be supportive of them. There's not a lot that a friend can do really to change what someone else's, someone else's behavior.
And I always say that people know. They know themselves what's going on. Where people often think like someone's obese, that other people have to tell them they're obese. They already know that.
Yes.
Or if someone's very thin, they already know that. I mean, they know what's going on.
Yeah.
But
it's painful sometimes to watch people we love, suffer. But the
Yeah.
truth is that we can't really change them. They have to want to make the change. Yeah.
Well, thank you, DEVORAH. How do people get in touch with you if they want to explore this further?
Oh, they can go to my website.
Your website?
Yes, DEVORAHRODGERS.com.
And let's spell that for the folks. Wait, I was spelling it for you. Here, go
You
ahead.
want me to spell it, or you can spell it?
Test me.
Okay.
DEV as in Victor, ORAHROD
As in David.
Yeah, David.
Okay.
GERS.
That's right.
.com.
.com.
DevorahRodgers.com.
Yeah, and you can get in touch with me there, and I'd be happy to talk with you. And if I can point you in the right direction, I'm happy to.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for coming. Yeah. That was really valuable, really interesting, and we'll have to have you back again.
That sounds great.
Thank you, everyone. Wow, that really, I'm so surprised we ate up that. Wow, that was not, that double entendre was not meant.
It's okay.
That whole hour. But thank you so much. Thank you. Next time we come, just to like, subscribe, to give us 5 stars. I can't even remember where my stuff is. To like, to subscribe, to give us 5 stars. If you have any questions, please contact DEVORAH, DevorahRodgers.com. Also, you can go to our YouTube site for show notes, which will include a bunch of research we have about eating disorders, as well as some links, and certainly to DEVORAH Rogers. You can go to youtube.com/Dr. Greg. Until next time, can you do this with me, Bryan? Until next time, this is Dr. Greg, Bryan, and this is eating disorders expert DEVORAH Rogers and Tony Sweet bidding you farewell. Be present, be flexible, and be kind.